Imagine being the most ordinary person in the galaxy, working a dead-end job on a forgotten mining station, barely scraping by, invisible to everyone around you. Now imagine the most powerful being in known space, ruler of 1,000 worlds, commander of fleets that could shatter stars, suddenly declaring to the entire galaxy that you are their destined mate. But here's the twist: you're human. And humans? They're considered the weakest, most pathetic species in the cosmic hierarchy. They're the janitors, the laborers, the ones everyone else looks down upon. So when Empress Zarathal Vex, the apex sovereign who has never been defeated in battle and whose very presence makes planets surrender, makes this impossible announcement, it doesn't just shock the galaxy, it breaks it. Some call it a cosmic joke. Others whisper of ancient prophecies. The powerful scheme to use this revelation for their own ends. But Jake Morrison, a simple human maintenance worker, finds himself thrust into a universe-spanning adventure where he must prove that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected places. This is the story of how one ordinary human changed the fate of trillions, challenged the cosmic order, and discovered that being weak might just be humanity's greatest strength. Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands with a worn rag, the harsh fluorescent lights of Maintenance Space 7 casting harsh shadows across his tired face. Another 12-hour shift on mining station Zirion 7 was coming to an end, and all he wanted was to collapse on his narrow bunk and forget about the universe for a few hours. At 28 standard years old, he had spent the last decade of his life crawling through ventilation shafts, fixing broken atmospheric processors, and being treated like furniture by the various alien species that ran the station. The Zirion system wasn't exactly the crown jewel of galactic civilization. Located on the outer rim of the Terran colonial zone, it served as a barely profitable mining operation extracting rare minerals from the asteroid belt. Most of the real work was done by massive automated systems, leaving humans like Jake to handle the maintenance tasks that the other species considered beneath them. It was honest work, he supposed, but it didn't exactly make him feel like humanity was making its mark on the galaxy. Morrison. The voice belonged to Supervisor Krelthak, a Zephyrian whose blue-scaled hide always seemed to shimmer with barely contained irritation. His forearms gestured impatiently as Jake emerged from beneath a malfunctioning oxygen recycler. You're needed in the main communication hub. Something's wrong with the primary receiver array. Jake nodded, gathering his tools. The communication hub was the heart of the station's connection to the rest of the galaxy, handling everything from supply requests to personal messages from home. If it was down, everyone on the station would be effectively cut off from the outside universe until it was fixed. He'd worked on the system before, it was old, prone to breakdowns, and held together more by prayer than proper engineering. As he made his way through the station's corridors, Jake passed the usual mix of species that called Zirion 7 home. Tall, elegant Altarians with their silver skin and flowing movements. Stocky Corvan engineers with their natural affinity for technology. A few Nexary traders with their multiple eyes constantly scanning for opportunities. And, scattered throughout, humans like himself, the maintenance workers, the custodial staff, the ones who kept everything running while being largely invisible to everyone else. The communication hub was a mess of blinking lights, warning alarms, and frustrated technicians. Chief Communications Officer Veltar, a Nexary with particularly intense purple eyes, spotted Jake immediately. About time, Morrison. The primary array went down 20 minutes ago, right in the middle of receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Assembly. We need it back online now. Jake surveyed the damage. The main receiver unit was sparking intermittently, and several of the quantum resonance crystals that powered the long-range communications had burned out. It was the kind of repair that would normally take hours, but he'd learned to work fast over the years. As he began replacing the damaged components, he couldn't help but overhear the conversations around him. "This is the worst possible timing," Veltar was saying to his assistant. The transmission was flagged as an emergency broadcast from the Imperial Palace on Vexi Prime. Something about the Empress making a major announcement. The Empress. Even on a backwater station like Zirion 7, everyone knew about Empress Zarathal Vex. The apex sovereign of the Galactic Imperial Federation, ruler of over 1,000 worlds, and arguably the most powerful individual in known space. She had conquered half the galaxy through a combination of military genius, political cunning, and personal combat abilities that bordered on the supernatural. Her species, the Vexhi, were natural apex predators, 8 feet tall, incredibly strong, with reflexes that made them nearly unbeatable in combat. Jake had seen holovids of her during her various conquests and diplomatic victories. She was striking even by alien standards. Her dark purple skin seemed to absorb light, her golden eyes could apparently see across multiple spectrums, and her presence alone was said to make hardened warriors trembling. She had never been defeated in personal combat, had never lost a strategic engagement, and ruled her empire with an iron fist wrapped in diplomatic silk. What could someone like that possibly have to announce that would warrant an emergency broadcast to every corner of the galaxy? Got it, Jake announced, as the primary receiver suddenly hummed back to life. The communication hub's main screen flickered, then displayed a clear signal. You should be able to pick up that transmission now. Veltar's multiple eyes focused on the screen as he quickly input commands. Excellent work, Morrison. Now let's see what was so important that it couldn't wait. His voice trailed off as the screen filled with an image that made everyone in the room stop what they were doing. The Imperial throne room on Vexhi Prime was a massive chamber carved from a single piece of black crystal, designed to emphasize the power and majesty of whoever sat upon the golden throne at its center. And there, in all her terrifying glory, sat Empress Zarathal Vex herself. Even through the holographic projection, her presence seemed to fill the room. She wore her formal regalia, a crown that seemed to be made of captured starlight, robes that shifted color like oil on water, and the scepter of dominion that was said to contain the compressed matter of a neutron star. But there was something different about her today. Instead of her usual expression of calculated authority, she seemed almost excited. Her golden eyes held an emotion that Jake couldn't quite identify, and there was a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth that suggested she was about to share news that pleased her greatly. Citizens of the Galactic Imperial Federation, her voice resonated with harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the nervous system. Today marks a momentous occasion in the history of our great empire. After centuries of rule, after countless battles and diplomatic victories, I have discovered something that changes everything. The camera pulled back slightly, revealing the full majesty of the throne room. Representatives from dozens of worlds and species had gathered to witness whatever announcement the Empress was about to make. Jake could see Corvan generals, Altarian diplomats, Nexari trade representatives, and dozens of other species all waiting with barely contained curiosity. Throughout my reign, I have sought to bring order and prosperity to the galaxy. I have conquered worlds, forged alliances, and built an empire that spans the stars. But there has always been something missing. A void that no amount of power or territory could fill. The Empress paused, and, for a moment her expression became almost vulnerable. Today, that void has been filled. Jake found himself leaning closer to the screen, caught up in the drama of the moment despite himself. Around him, every person in the communication hub was equally transfixed. Whatever the Empress was about to reveal, it was clearly something unprecedented. The ancient prophecies speak of a bond that transcends species, politics, and even physical law itself. A connection between souls that cannot be broken, denied, or ignored. For centuries, these prophecies were dismissed as folklore, as romantic fantasy with no basis in reality. The Empress stood from her throne, and Jake could see that she was actually trembling slightly with emotion. Today, I stand before you to announce that these prophecies are not fantasy. They are truth. The assembled representatives began murmuring among themselves, clearly as confused as Jake felt. Ancient prophecies? Soul bonds? This wasn't the kind of announcement anyone had been expecting from the galaxy's most pragmatic ruler. Through methods I will not detail for security reasons, I have confirmed the identity of my destined mate. The one being in all the galaxy who is truly meant to be my partner, my equal, my other half. The Empress raised the scepter of dominion, and its crystal core began to glow with an inner light. Citizens of the Empire, I present to you the future Prince Consort of the Galactic Imperial Federation. The massive screen behind the throne flickered to life, and Jake felt his heart stop. His own face was staring back at him. Not someone who looked like him. Not someone with similar features. His exact face, complete with the small scar on his chin from a childhood accident and the slightly crooked nose from a maintenance accident 2 years ago. His employee photo from the Zirian 7 personnel database was being broadcast across the galaxy as the Empress continued her announcement. Jake Morrison, age 28 standard years, currently residing on mining station Zirian 7. Human species, maintenance classification, no significant political or military connections. The Empress's voice had taken on an almost reverent tone as she read what was clearly his complete personnel file. This humble individual, who has spent his life in service to others, who has asked for nothing more than honest work and fair treatment, is destined to stand beside me as we guide the galaxy into a new age. The silence in the communication hub was deafening. Jake felt as though he was having some kind of out-of-body experience, watching his own life become galactic news while his mind struggled to process what was happening. This had to be a mistake. Some kind of technical error. Maybe someone had hacked the Imperial communication system as a prank. But, then, the Empress did something that made it clear this was no mistake. She looked directly into the camera, her golden eyes seeming to pierce through the holographic projection and focus on him specifically, and spoke in a voice that was gentle, loving, and absolutely certain. Jake Morrison, wherever you are right now, whatever you're feeling, know this: I have searched for you across time and space. The bond between us is written in the very fabric of reality itself. You are not just my mate, you are my salvation, my completion, my heart made manifest. And I will move heaven and earth to bring you home to me. The transmission ended, leaving the communication hub in stunned silence. Jake stared at the blank screen, his tools forgotten in his hands, his mind completely unable to process what had just happened. The most powerful person in the galaxy had just announced to trillions of beings that he, Jake Morrison, human maintenance worker, nobody from nowhere, was her destined mate. The silence lasted exactly 3 more seconds before the room exploded into chaos. Holy stars, it's him! Veltar's voice cracked with excitement. He's right here. The Empress's mate is on our station. Get security, someone shouted. Lock down the station. No one gets on or off until we figure out what to do. Contact the Imperial Palace immediately, another voice demanded. They need to know we have him. Jake found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity as station personnel suddenly surrounded him. Some were asking questions he couldn't answer, others were trying to escort him somewhere safe, and still others were frantically making calls to their superiors. Through it all, Jake stood frozen, still trying to understand how his life had gone from routine maintenance work to galactic significance in the span of a 5-minute announcement. Station Commander Thelvas, a Corvan with more military decorations than Jake had ever seen on one person, pushed through the crowd with the authority of someone used to being obeyed instantly. His gray skin was flushed with excitement, and his cybernetic eye was whirring as it recorded everything for later analysis. Morrison, you're coming with me right now, the commander said, though his tone was more protective than authoritative. We need to get you to a secure location until we can figure out what happens next. This station is about to become the center of galactic attention, and we need to make sure you're safe. Safe. The word seemed almost laughable. Jake had gone from being the most anonymous person on the station to being the most famous person in the galaxy. How could anywhere be safe now? As they hurried through corridors that suddenly seemed filled with staring faces and whispered conversations, Jake's mind began to work through the implications of what had just happened. If the Empress was serious about this mate bond, then his life as he knew it was over. He would be expected to leave everything behind, travel to the most dangerous court in the galaxy, and somehow figure out how to be the partner of someone who could destroy planets with a thought. But, beyond the personal implications, there were larger questions that made his head spin. Why him? What made a human maintenance worker suitable to be the mate of the galaxy's apex predator? And what would this mean for humanity as a species? Humans were already at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. Would this elevate their status, or would it make them targets for those who resented the Empress's power? The secure conference room that Commander Thelvas led him to was normally used for classified mining operation briefings, but it had been hastily converted into a makeshift command center. Multiple screens showed news feeds from across the galaxy, all focused on the Empress's announcement and the search for more information about Jake Morrison. One screen showed his childhood home on Earth, another showed his previous assignments, and a third was running analysis of his genetic background and family history. Sir, Communications Officer Veltar burst into the room, his multiple eyes wide with excitement. "We're receiving priority communications from 17 different imperial agencies, 43 news networks, and at least a dozen planetary governments. Everyone wants to know about Morrison, and everyone wants to make sure he's protected until the Empress can claim him." Claim him. The word sent a chill down Jake's spine. He wasn't a person anymore, he was a prize to be claimed, a piece on a galactic chessboard that everyone wanted to control. Commander Thalvas studied the various screens, his military training evident in the way he processed information, and began making decisions. "What's our security status? How long until we have company?" "Imperial Guard units are already en route," Veltar reported. "ETA approximately 6 hours. We've also got requests for landing permission from 17 different ships, ranging from news crews to what appear to be diplomatic envoys from various worlds." "And the not-so-friendly interest?" Veltar's expression darkened. 3 vessels have appeared at the edge of the system running dark. No identification, no communication. Could be pirates looking to cash in, could be political enemies of the Empress hoping to use Morrison as leverage. Jake finally found his voice. "This is insane. 6 hours ago I was fixing an air recycler. Now I'm apparently the most wanted person in the galaxy. Can't we just, I don't know, tell everyone this is a mistake?" Commander Thalvas looked at him with something approaching sympathy. "Son, I've been in the Imperial military for 40 years. I've seen the Empress in action, I've studied her psychological profiles, and I've never once seen her make a mistake about anything important. If she says you're her mate, then something about you triggered whatever ancient systems she used to identify you. This isn't a mistake, it's destiny." Destiny. Another word that seemed too large for someone like Jake to carry. He thought about his modest apartment, his simple routines, his quiet hopes for maybe someday saving enough money to visit Earth again. All of that was gone now, replaced by something he couldn't even begin to understand. "What happens next?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he really wanted to know the answer. Commander Thalvas activated a secure communication channel. "Next, we keep you alive and safe until the Imperial Guard arrives. Then, they escort you to the capital, where you meet the Empress and figure out how to be the most important person in the galaxy." He paused, studying Jake with the calculating gaze of a career military officer. "But first, we need to talk about what kind of person you really are, because something tells me there's more to Jake Morrison than meets the eye." As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The secure channel crackled to life with urgent reports. "Commander, we have multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Unknown configuration, but they're big and they're armed. They're demanding we turn over Morrison or face the consequences." Jake felt his stomach drop as the reality of his situation became crystal clear. He wasn't just the Empress's mate, he was a target, a prize, and a weapon all rolled into one. And, somewhere out there, the most powerful person in the galaxy was moving heaven and earth to claim him, while others were willing to start a war to stop her. His quiet life was over. His adventure was just beginning. The unknown ships had positioned themselves in a perfect attack formation around mining station Zirian 7, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that made the station's defensive systems look like toys. Commander Thalvas studied the tactical display with the grim expression of someone who had seen this kind of situation before and knew it rarely ended well. 15 ships, heavy cruiser class or better, reported Lieutenant Kexare from the tactical station. Energy signatures suggest they're from the hegemony of free worlds. The ones demanding Morrison are flying under a diplomatic flag, but their weapons are hot and ready. Jake felt a knot forming in his stomach. The hegemony of free worlds was a loose confederation of planets that had refused to join the Galactic Imperial Federation, preferring their independence to the Empress's rule. They weren't exactly enemies of the Empire, but they weren't friends either, and they certainly wouldn't want to see the Empress gain any additional advantages through a prophesied mate bond. "What do they want exactly?" Commander Thalvas asked. The communication system crackled to life before Lieutenant Kexare could answer. A voice filled with authority and barely contained aggression spoke in the universal trade language that most species used for interstellar diplomacy. "Commander of Mining Station Zirian 7, this is Admiral Voskrental of the Hegemony Navy. We are operating under the emergency protocols of galactic stability. The individual known as Jake Morrison represents a clear and present danger to the balance of power in this galaxy. For the protection of all free beings, we demand his immediate transfer to hegemony custody, or he will be kept safe from Imperial manipulation. Jake stared at the communication console in disbelief. Manipulation? I haven't even met the Empress yet. How can I be manipulated by someone I've never spoken to? Commander Thelvas held up a hand for silence as he activated his own communication channel. Admiral Krentel, this is Commander Thelvas of the Imperial Mining Authority. Jake Morrison is a civilian under Imperial protection on an Imperial station. He has committed no crimes and poses no threat to anyone. Your demand for his transfer is rejected. Commander, Admiral Krentel's voice took on a harder edge. You have 30 minutes to comply with our request. After that time, we will be forced to take more direct action to protect galactic stability. The channel closed, leaving the secure conference room in tense silence. Jake looked around at the faces surrounding him, some worried, some excited, all focused on him as though he held the key to preventing an interstellar incident. Which, he realized with growing dread, he probably did. Why don't I just go with them, he asked. I mean, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm some kind of weapon or tool that the Empress wants to use, and the galaxy would be safer if I was somewhere neutral. Commander Thelvas turned to look at him with an expression of profound seriousness. Son, do you have any idea what the Empress is capable of when someone threatens something she considers hers? 3 years ago, a pirate group kidnapped a diplomat she was fond of. She didn't just rescue the diplomat, she tracked down every member of the organization, every person who had ever helped them, and every government that had ever given them safe harbor. When she was finished, 7 planets had new governments and the concept of piracy in that sector had been effectively eliminated. Jake felt his mouth go dry. And now they want to kidnap her destined mate. Exactly. If these hegemony ships take you by force, they're not just starting a diplomatic incident, they're declaring war on the most dangerous person in the galaxy. Commander Thelvas activated several screens showing ship positions and defensive capabilities. But if we can hold out until the Imperial Guard arrives, everyone gets to walk away from this alive. How long until the Guard gets here? Jake asked. Lieutenant Kexare checked her instruments. 4 hours, 37 minutes. The flagship Emperor's Will is leading the formation, along with 12 other vessels including the heavy battlecruiser Dominion's Edge. Jake had heard of the Emperor's Will. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of it. The Empress's personal flagship was less a ship and more a mobile battle station, capable of taking on entire fleets and winning. If it was coming for him personally, then the Empress was taking no chances with his safety. But 4.5 hours was a long time to hold off 15 enemy ships with nothing but a mining station's basic defenses. Commander, Communications Officer Veltar's voice was tight with urgency. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Imperial Palace. It's from the Empress herself. The main screen flickered to life, and once again Jake found himself face to face with the most powerful person in the galaxy. But this time, instead of the formal throne room setting, she appeared to be in what looked like a military command center. Her formal regalia had been replaced by practical battle armor that somehow made her look even more intimidating than before. Her golden eyes held an intensity that made Jake feel as though she could see him through the transmission. Commander Thelvas, her voice carried harmonics of barely contained fury, I understand that hegemony forces are threatening my mate. This is unacceptable. Your Imperial Majesty, Commander Thelvas snapped to attention despite being alone in the room, we are prepared to defend Morrison until the Imperial Guard arrives. The station's defensive systems are fully operational, and we have a complete tactical analysis of the enemy formation. The Empress studied the tactical data that appeared on her screen, her expression growing darker. 15 heavy cruisers. Admiral Krentel commanding. They're not here to negotiate, they're here to take Jake by force and use him as leverage against the Empire. Her gaze shifted, and Jake realized she was looking directly at him through the camera. Jake Morrison, can you hear me? Jake's voice caught in his throat. Speaking to the Empress felt surreal, like addressing a force of nature. Yes, Your Majesty. I can hear you. Her expression immediately softened, the terrifying ruler replaced by something that looked almost vulnerable. "Are you hurt? Are you afraid? I know this must be overwhelming for you." The concern in her voice was so genuine, so unexpected, that Jake found himself responding honestly. "I'm terrified. 6 hours ago I was nobody special, and now there are warships pointing guns at me because of something I don't understand. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, or how I'm supposed to help anyone, or why the universe thinks I'm important enough to start a war over." The Empress was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could see something shifting in her expression. When she spoke again, her voice held a gentleness he wouldn't have thought possible from someone of her reputation. "Jake, I know you didn't ask for any of this. I know your life has been turned upside down by forces beyond your control. But I need you to understand something: the bond between us isn't just about prophecy or destiny or political advantage. When I confirmed your identity, when I felt our connection across the vastness of space, it was like finding a part of myself I didn't know was missing." She paused, and Jake could see her struggling with emotions she wasn't used to expressing publicly. "You are not a weapon to be used or a prize to be won. You are my partner, my equal, my heart. And I will tear the galaxy apart before I let anyone use you against your will." Jake felt something stirring in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. Despite everything, the ships, the threats, the impossible situation, he found himself believing her. There was something in her voice, in the way she looked at him, that made him feel valued as a person rather than a political asset. "What do I need to do?" he asked. "For now, stay safe. Trust Commander Thelvas and his people to protect you until I can get there." "And, Jake?" Her expression became fierce again, but the fierceness was directed outward, toward their enemies. "Know that you are not alone in this. Every resource of the Empire is being mobilized to ensure your safety. The entire Imperial Navy is moving to protect you." The transmission ended, leaving Jake with a strange sense of comfort despite the dire situation. He wasn't just a random human anymore, he was someone that the galaxy's most powerful person cared about personally. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely overwhelming all at once. "Well," Commander Thelvas said dryly, "that settles the question of whether we're going to fight. When the Empress gives a direct order to protect someone, you protect them even if it means taking on the entire galaxy." Alarms began blaring again, and Lieutenant Kexaray's voice cracked with urgency. "Commander, the hegemony ships are moving into attack position. They're charging weapons and raising shields. Time to compliance, 8 minutes." Jake watched the tactical display as the enemy ships formed a perfect siege formation around the station. Each vessel was easily 10 times the size of Zirion 7, with enough firepower to reduce the mining facility to scrap metal in minutes. The station's own defenses, designed more for deterring pirates than fighting a real military force, seemed pathetically inadequate in comparison. "Can we actually hold them off for 4 hours?" Jake asked. Commander Thelvas was already issuing orders to his crew, activating every defensive system the station possessed and coordinating with the mining ships in the area. "Maybe. Mining stations aren't built for combat, but Zirion 7 has some advantages. We're built into a large asteroid, which gives us natural armor. Our shields are designed to handle asteroid impacts and solar radiation, so they're tougher than they look. And we've got something the hegemony doesn't expect." "What's that?" "Humans." Commander Thelvas smiled grimly. "Every other species in the galaxy fights according to established protocols and tactical doctrines. Humans improvise. They think outside the box. They do things that make no sense according to military theory but somehow work anyway." He activated the station-wide communication system. "Attention all personnel, this is the commander. We are about to be attacked by hegemony forces attempting to capture Jake Morrison. All human personnel report to defensive stations immediately. All non-essential personnel seek shelter in the deep mining tunnels." Jake watched in amazement as the station transformed around them. What had seemed like a routine mining operation revealed hidden defensive capabilities as blast barriers slammed into place, weapon systems emerged from concealed positions, and the corridors filled with humans carrying tools and equipment that could serve double duty as weapons or defensive measures. "Morrison," Commander Thelvas said, I need you to understand something. The people on this station, human and alien alike, they're willing to risk their lives to protect you. Not because you're some prophesied prince, but because you're one of us. You've worked alongside these people, fixed their equipment, helped them solve problems. They're fighting for Jake the maintenance worker, not Jake the imperial consort. The truth of that statement hit Jake harder than he expected. Looking around the command center, he recognized faces, fellow maintenance workers, technicians, even some of the alien supervisors who had always treated him fairly. These people weren't protecting him because of orders or politics. They were protecting him because he was part of their community. Incoming transmission from Admiral Krentel, Veltar reported. Put him through, Commander Thelvas ordered. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, his species' natural aggression making his intentions clear even before he spoke. Commander, your time is up. We are prepared to take Morrison by force if necessary. Stand down your defenses and prepare for boarding. Admiral, Commander Thelvas replied calmly, I have a message from the Empress regarding your demands. What message? Commander Thelvas smiled coldly. Go to hell. The first energy blasts hit Zirion 7's shields 3 seconds later, lighting up the asteroid mining station like a small star. The battle for Jake Morrison had begun. Jake felt the station shudder under the impact of the hegemony weapons, but the shields held. Around him, the command center staff worked with calm efficiency, coordinating defensive fire and damage control with the practiced ease of people who knew their equipment inside and out. Shield strength at 87%, Lieutenant Kexra reported. Return fire is having minimal effect on their heavy armor. We're not trying to destroy them, Commander Thelvas explained. We're trying to delay them. Every minute we hold out is a minute closer to the Imperial Guard arrival. Jake watched the tactical display as the battle unfolded. The mining station's weapons were designed for asteroid clearing, not ship-to-ship combat, but the human crews were using them in ways their designers had never intended. Focused mining lasers became precision cutting tools, slicing into enemy shield generators. Or processing charges became improvised missiles, launched from mining shuttles piloted by volunteers who flew like maniacs to avoid enemy fire. Humans, Commander Thelvas muttered admiringly as one mining shuttle somehow managed to slip through the enemy formation and deliver a charge directly to a cruiser's sensor array. Completely unpredictable. But, despite their creativity and determination, the defenders were clearly outgunned. The hegemony ships had professional military crews, advanced weapons systems, and numerical superiority. One by one, Zirion 7's defensive systems were being systematically destroyed. Shield strength at 40%, Lieutenant Kexra announced. Hull breaches on levels 7 through 12. We've lost the primary mining laser array. Jake felt helpless watching his friends and co-workers risk their lives for him. Maybe I should surrender. This is too much destruction for one person. Jake, Commander Thelvas turned to face him, his expression serious but determined. Look at these people. Really look at them. Do you see fear? Do you see regret? Jake looked around the command center. Despite the alarms, despite the shaking station, despite the very real possibility that they might all die in the next few minutes, he saw something else entirely. He saw humans and aliens working together with perfect coordination. He saw creativity and resourcefulness in the face of impossible odds. He saw people who had found something worth fighting for. I see determination, Jake said quietly. Exactly. These people aren't fighting because they have to. They're fighting because they choose to. And that's the most human thing in the galaxy, the willingness to stand up for what's right even when the odds are impossible. The station shook again, harder this time. Emergency lighting flickered as power systems strained to maintain shields and life support simultaneously. But, somehow, impossibly, they were still holding out. Time to Imperial Guard arrival? Commander Thelvas asked. 2 hours, 14 minutes, Lieutenant Kexra replied. Jake settled in for what promised to be the longest 2 hours of his life, watching ordinary people do extraordinary things to protect someone they barely knew, simply because it was the right thing to do. He was beginning to understand that being human in this galaxy meant more than anyone realized. The battle had raged for over an hour when Jake witnessed something that changed his understanding of what it meant to be human in the galaxy. Maintenance worker Lisa Chen, a quiet woman in her 50s who had always been kind to Jake but rarely spoke to anyone, had jury-rigged 3 atmospheric processors into a makeshift weapon that somehow managed to disable an entire hegemony cruiser. How did she do that? Admiral Krentel's frustrated voice came through the communication channel. His formation was still intact, but several of his ships were operating with reduced capabilities thanks to the increasingly creative defensive measures of Zirion 7's human crew. Commander Thelvas smiled as he watched Lisa coordinate with a team of Corvin engineers to prepare another improvised weapon. Admiral, you've been fighting humans all wrong. You keep expecting us to follow your tactical playbook, but humans don't have a playbook. We make it up as we go along. Jake was beginning to understand what the commander meant. Every species he had encountered in his decade of galactic service had their specializations. Corvin were natural engineers, methodical and precise. Zephyrians were gifted administrators, capable of managing complex systems with ease. Altarians were natural diplomats, able to find common ground between conflicting parties. Nexari were brilliant traders, capable of seeing profitable opportunities where others saw only problems. But humans? Humans were generalists. They weren't the best at anything specific, but they were decent at everything. More importantly, they were adaptable in ways that other species weren't. When faced with an impossible situation, most species would follow their established protocols and accept failure when those protocols proved inadequate. Humans would throw out the protocols entirely and try something that had never been done before. Morrison, Commander Thelvas called out, "I need you to do something that might sound crazy." "Everything about today sounds crazy," Jake replied. "What do you need?" "I need you to talk to the hegemony forces. Not as the Empress's mate, not as some kind of political asset, but as Jake Morrison, maintenance worker. I think they need to understand who they're really fighting for." Jake stared at him. "You want me to give a speech?" "I'm not exactly trained in public speaking." "That's exactly why it might work. Admiral Krentel is expecting imperial propaganda or political maneuvering. He's not expecting honesty from a regular person caught up in something bigger than himself." Jake looked around the command center, at the faces of people who had been willing to risk everything for him. Lisa Chen was back at her station, already working on another impossible modification to their defensive systems. Supervisor Krelthak was coordinating damage control teams, his usual irritation replaced by fierce determination. Even the normally aloof Altarian trade representatives had volunteered for dangerous repair missions. These people deserved to have their story told. "Put me through to the hegemony fleet," Jake said. The main screen flickered as the communication channel opened. Admiral Krentel appeared, his aggressive features showing signs of frustration and confusion. Behind him, Jake could see the organized efficiency of a military vessel designed for conquest and control. "Admiral Krentel," Jake began, his voice steadier than he had expected, "my name is Jake Morrison. I understand you want to capture me to prevent the Empress from gaining some kind of strategic advantage." "Morrison, you don't understand the forces at play here," the Admiral replied. "The Empress has spent centuries accumulating power. If she gains a mystical mate bond that legitimizes her rule in the eyes of various religious factions throughout the galaxy, her empire will become unstoppable. We're trying to preserve the balance of power that keeps the galaxy free." "I appreciate that, Admiral. I really do. But I think you're missing something important about what's happening here." Jake gestured around the command center, making sure the Admiral could see the mixture of species working together with desperate efficiency. "Look at these people. Really look at them. Do you see Imperial soldiers following orders? Do you see political fanatics defending their ideology?" Admiral Krentel's expression shifted slightly as he studied the images. "I see civilians. Mining workers and technicians." "Exactly. These people aren't fighting for the Empire or for political ideology or for ancient prophecies. They're fighting for me. Jake Morrison, the guy who fixes their air recyclers and unclogs their waste disposal systems. The human who works double shifts when someone calls in sick and shares his rations when supply shipments run late. Jake felt his confidence growing as he spoke. This wasn't about politics or destiny or galactic power structures. This was about something much simpler and much more powerful. Admiral, I've been thinking about what makes humans different from other species in the galaxy. We're not stronger like the Vexi, or smarter like the Corvin, or more organized like the Zephyrians. But we have something that most species don't. Which is, we care about individuals. When a Corvin makes a decision, they consider what's best for their engineering project. When an Altarian negotiates, they think about what's best for their diplomatic mission. When humans act, we think about what's best for the people we care about. Jake looked directly into the camera, hoping his sincerity would come through. Every person on this station could have evacuated when you arrived. They could have saved themselves and left me to face this alone. Instead, they chose to stay and fight impossible odds to protect one person they happen to like. Admiral Krentel was quiet for a moment, his military bearing faltering slightly. What exactly are you trying to tell me, Morrison? I'm trying to tell you that you're afraid of the wrong thing. You're worried that the Empress will use me to become more powerful, but you're not asking the right question. Which is, what if I use her to make the galaxy more human? The statement hung in the air between them, and Jake could see the Admiral processing the implications. It wasn't a thought that had occurred to any of the political analysts or military strategists who had planned this operation. Think about it, Jake continued. The Empress is bonded to a human. Not just any human, but a working-class human who spent his life taking care of other people. Do you really think that's going to make her more tyrannical, or do you think it might make her more interested in taking care of ordinary citizens? Jake could see uncertainty creeping into the Admiral's expression. This wasn't the conversation he had been prepared for. Every species in the galaxy has their own planets, their own governments, their own ways of doing things. But humans? We're scattered across 1,000 worlds, working in support roles, keeping the infrastructure running while everyone else focuses on their specializations. We see how all the different species live, what works for them and what doesn't. And, you know what we've learned? What? Most problems get solved when people actually talk to each other instead of shooting first and asking questions later. Jake felt a strange sense of calm settling over him. For the first time since this ordeal began, he felt like he understood his role in the larger picture. He wasn't a weapon or a political asset or a mystical chosen one. He was something much more important. He was a translator between different ways of thinking. Admiral, I'm going to make you an offer. Instead of trying to capture me or destroy this station, why don't you send some representatives over here? Come see how humans and aliens work together when they're focused on solving problems instead of fighting over territory. Maybe we can find a solution that doesn't involve anyone getting killed. Admiral Krentel studied him for a long moment, and Jake could see the military commander warring with something that might have been curiosity. You're suggesting I negotiate with a mining station that's been shooting at my ships for the past hour? I'm suggesting you negotiate with people who turned a mining station into a fortress because they believe in protecting their friends. There's a difference. The communication channel closed, leaving the command center in tense silence. Jake wasn't sure if he had made things better or worse, but at least he had tried to represent the human perspective in a situation that seemed to be spinning out of everyone's control. That was either brilliant or completely insane, Commander Thelvas said. Possibly both. Time to Imperial Guard arrival? Jake asked. 1 hour, 23 minutes, Lieutenant Kexare reported. But, Admiral, the hegemony fleet has stopped firing. They're actually moving into a defensive formation around the station. Jake felt a spark of hope. Defensive formation? As if they're protecting us from something else, Commander Thelvas confirmed, studying the tactical display with growing amazement. Morrison, I think your speech might have actually worked. The communication system crackled to life again, but this time it wasn't Admiral Krentel's voice. Instead, a new speaker with the refined tones of a professional diplomat addressed the station. Mining Station Zirian 7, this is Ambassador Yeltera of the Hegemony Diplomatic Corps. Admiral Krentel has requested that I negotiate a temporary ceasefire while we evaluate the situation. We are prepared to discuss alternative solutions to the current crisis.
Jake felt something he hadn't experienced since this whole ordeal began: actual hope.
Maybe it was possible to solve galactic problems without shooting first and asking questions later. Maybe the human approach of talking things through could work on a larger scale. But their temporary peace was shattered by the arrival of a new voice on the communication channel, one that sent chills down Jake's spine. How touching! The voice was smooth, cultured, and filled with the kind of confidence that came from never having been defeated in anything that mattered. The monkey speaks, and everyone listens. But I'm afraid playtime is over. A new ship appeared on the tactical display, sleek and predatory in a way that made all the hegemony cruisers look like cargo haulers. Its energy signature was unlike anything Jake had ever seen: alien, powerful, and somehow fundamentally wrong.
Who is that? Jake asked. Commander Felvas's face had gone pale.
That's a Veltar assault ship. The Veltar Confederacy, they're not part of the hegemony, they're not part of the Empire, and they definitely don't follow anyone's rules about diplomatic immunity or civilian protection. The smooth voice continued its broadcast. I am War Prince Kethvar of the Veltar Confederacy. The human known as Jake Morrison represents a fundamental disruption to the natural order of galactic power. The Veltar have decided that this disruption must be corrected.
Admiral Krentel's voice cut through the channel, sharp with alarm.
War Prince, this is a diplomatic situation.
We are negotiating a peaceful resolution. How quaint.
The hegemony has grown soft, willing to negotiate with prey species. The Veltar have no such weaknesses. The War Prince's tone became mockingly casual. I will give you all 60 seconds to clear the area before I reduce this station to cosmic dust. The human's death will serve as an example to others who might challenge the proper hierarchy of the galaxy.
Jake felt his blood turn to ice.
The Veltar were legendary throughout the galaxy for their ruthlessness and their complete lack of interest in anything resembling mercy or diplomacy. They were apex predators who believed that strength was the only virtue that mattered, and they had never been successfully defeated in combat by any known force.
60 seconds to live, unless something miraculous happened.
Jake looked around the command center at the faces of people who had already risked everything to protect him. Good people, brave people, who deserved better than to die because the galaxy couldn't figure out how to handle one confused human maintenance worker.
Commander, Jake said quietly, is there any way to evacuate the civilians before that ship attacks? Commander Felvas checked his instruments. Not in 60 seconds. Maybe not even if we had 60 minutes.
Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. He activated the communication channel to address the Veltar War Prince directly.
War Prince Kethvar, this is Jake Morrison. I understand you want to kill me to preserve some kind of galactic hierarchy.
The monkey speaks, the War Prince replied with amusement.
How unexpected.
Yes, little human, your death will serve as an important lesson about knowing one's place in the universe. I have a counter-proposal, Jake said, his voice steadier than he felt.
Instead of slaughtering innocent civilians to get to me, why don't you and I settle this directly? One-on-one combat, according to whatever rules you prefer.
If you win, you prove that humans don't belong in positions of power.
If I win, well, maybe that proves something else entirely.
The silence that followed his challenge lasted exactly 37 seconds.
Then, War Prince Kethvar began to laugh. War Prince Kethvar's laughter echoed through the communication system like the sound of breaking glass.
When it finally stopped, his voice carried a mixture of amusement and predatory anticipation that made Jake's skin crawl.
How delightfully unexpected.
The little human wants to challenge a Veltar War Prince to single combat.
The alien's tone suggested he was genuinely entertained by the prospect. Tell me, monkey, have you ever seen what happens when a Veltar feeds? Have you ever witnessed the exquisite art of a proper hunt? Jake forced himself to keep his voice steady. I've seen what happens when bullies think they can push people around without consequences. Sometimes they're surprised by what they find. Bullies? The War Prince's amusement deepened.
You misunderstand the fundamental nature of reality, little human. The Veltar are not bullies, we are evolution's answer to the question of survival. We are what lesser species become when they shed the weakness of compassion and embrace the purity of strength. Around the command center, Jake could see the expressions of everyone present. Some looked terrified, others seemed amazed by his audacity, but all of them appeared to understand that he was trying to give them a chance to survive. Commander Thelvas was making subtle hand gestures to his staff, preparing evacuation procedures in case Jake's gambit bought them any time at all. "So you accept my challenge?" Jake pressed. "Oh, I more than accept it, I embrace it. Single combat between a Veltar war prince and a human maintenance worker will serve as the perfect demonstration of natural hierarchy." War Prince Kethvar paused, and Jake could hear the anticipation in his voice. "But we must do this properly, according to the ancient codes. Traditional Veltar combat, no weapons except what nature provided, fight to the death. The survivor claims the right to determine the fate of everyone present." Jake felt his mouth go dry. Traditional Veltar combat meant facing 8 feet of engineered predator with nothing but his bare hands. The Veltar had been modified over generations to be perfect killing machines, faster, stronger, and more vicious than any naturally evolved species. Their claws could slice through metal, their reflexes were faster than human eyes could track, and they had never lost a recorded combat against any other species. "Jake," Commander Thelvas whispered urgently, "you don't have to do this. The Imperial Guard will be here in less than an hour. Maybe we can hold out until then, . And how many people die while we hold out?" Jake replied quietly. "How many good people get killed because I was too scared to face one monster?" The truth was, Jake was terrified. He had never been in a real fight in his life, let alone mortal combat with an apex predator. But he had also never been in a situation where his actions could save the lives of hundreds of innocent people. Sometimes being human meant doing the right thing even when you were absolutely certain you couldn't succeed. "I accept your terms," Jake announced. "Traditional Veltar combat, no weapons, winner takes all." War Prince Kethvar's approval vibrated through the speakers. "Excellent. I will dock with your pathetic little station in 10 minutes. Prepare a suitable arena. I want everyone to witness this demonstration of proper galactic hierarchy." The communication channel closed, leaving the command center in stunned silence. "Jake," Lieutenant Kexare spoke up, her voice filled with something that might have been admiration. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most stupid." "Probably both," Jake admitted. "Commander, can we set up the combat in Cargo Bay 5? It's the largest open space on the station, and it has observation galleries where non-combatants can watch safely." Commander Thelvas nodded grimly. "I'll make the arrangements. Jake, you should know that Veltar combat it's not just about physical strength. They're psychological predators too. They'll try to break your mind before they break your body." Jake thought about that as he made his way toward the cargo bay. In 10 minutes, he would be facing a creature specifically designed to kill him in front of an audience of people who were counting on him to somehow, impossibly, survive. The rational part of his mind was screaming that this was suicide, that he had no chance against a war prince, that he should be looking for escape routes instead of walking toward his own execution. But there was another part of his mind, a part that had been growing stronger since the Empress's announcement, that whispered something different. The Empress had seen something in him worth bonding with. The people on this station had seen something in him worth fighting for. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to Jake Morrison than even he realized. Cargo Bay 5 had been hastily converted into an arena. The massive space, normally used for storing processed minerals and equipment, now held a circle marked out in emergency lighting. Observation galleries on 3 levels were filled with station personnel, human and alien alike, who had come to witness what everyone expected to be Jake's heroic death. Jake stood in the center of the arena, wearing nothing but basic coveralls and work boots. He had refused all offers of improvised armor or weapons, partly because War Prince Kethvar had specified traditional combat, but mostly because he suspected that trying to fight a Veltar with conventional tactics would only get him killed faster. The War Prince shuttle had docked with the station 5 minutes ago, and Jake could hear the heavy footsteps approaching through the corridor. Whatever was about to walk through that door, Jake knew it would be unlike anything he had ever faced before. The cargo bay doors hissed open, and War Prince Kethvar entered. Jake had seen images of Veltar before, but seeing one in person was an entirely different experience. 8.5 feet tall, with silver-scaled skin that seemed to absorb light, the War Prince moved with a fluid grace that suggested perfect control over every muscle in his body. His face was vaguely reptilian, with golden eyes that held an intelligence as sharp as the claws extending from his fingertips. Most unsettling of all was his smile, a predator's expression of anticipation for the hunt. Such a small arena for such an important demonstration, War Prince Kethvar observed as he studied his surroundings. But it will suffice. Tell me, little human, have you made your peace with whatever primitive gods your species worships? Jake looked up at the observation galleries, at the faces of people who had become his friends over the years of working together. Lisa Chen was there, along with Supervisor Krelthak, Communications Officer Veltar, and dozens of others. They were all watching him with expressions of hope and fear and something that looked like pride. Actually, Jake said, surprising himself with how calm his voice sounded, I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. War Prince Kethvar studied him with those predatory golden eyes, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Interesting. Most prey species show more fear at this point. Are you perhaps too ignorant to understand what is about to happen to you? Oh, I understand perfectly, Jake replied. You're going to try to kill me, and I'm going to try to stop you. One of us is going to be very surprised by the outcome. The War Prince's laugh was like breaking crystal. Such confidence from such a fragile creature. Very well, let us begin this education. Jake had expected the War Prince to attack immediately, to use his superior speed and strength to end the fight quickly. Instead, the Veltar began to circle him slowly, speaking in a voice designed to undermine his confidence. Do you know what makes the Veltar superior to all other species? The War Prince asked casually. It is not just our physical capabilities, though we could tear apart any other creature in the galaxy. It is not just our intelligence, though we have mastered sciences that other species cannot even comprehend. Jake turned to keep facing his opponent, trying to read the alien's body language for signs of an impending attack. The War Prince moved like liquid death, every step perfectly balanced and ready to explode into violence. What makes us superior is our understanding of reality. We know that the universe is not fair, not kind, not interested in the survival of the weak. We know that compassion is a luxury that prey species use to comfort themselves before they are devoured. We know that strength is the only truth that matters. Jake felt something stirring in his chest, not fear, but anger. You know what I think makes humans different from species like yours? War Prince Kethvar paused his circling, genuinely curious. Please, enlighten me. We know that strength without compassion isn't strength at all. It's just violence looking for an excuse. Jake gestured toward the observation galleries. Every person watching this fight chose to risk their lives to protect someone they care about. That's not weakness, that's the strongest force in the galaxy. How touchingly naive. The War Prince's claws extended further, gleaming under the cargo bay lights. Shall we test your theory? The attack came faster than Jake's eyes could follow. One moment the War Prince was 10 feet away, the next his claws were slashing toward Jake's throat with lethal precision. Jake threw himself sideways, feeling the wind from the attack ruffle his hair as the claws missed by inches. Jake rolled, came to his feet, and immediately had to dodge again as the War Prince's follow-up strike tried to disembowel him. The alien's speed was incredible. Jake was surviving more on luck and adrenaline than any real skill. Impressive reflexes for a monkey, War Prince Kethvar commented, not even breathing hard. But reflexes will only delay the inevitable. Jake circled away from his opponent, his mind racing. He couldn't match the War Prince's speed or strength, and he certainly couldn't match his combat experience. But Jake had spent 10 years working on space stations and mining operations, solving problems that had no obvious solutions, finding ways to make broken systems work against all odds. The War Prince attacked again, a flurry of claws and teeth that should have ended the fight immediately. But, instead of trying to match the alien's aggression, Jake did something unexpected. He grabbed a nearby piece of mining equipment and threw it, not at the War Prince, but at the cargo bay's gravity controls. The artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, sending both combatants floating toward the ceiling in the reduced gravity field. But, while the War Prince struggled to adapt to the changing conditions, Jake used his experience working in zero-G environments to his advantage, pushing off walls and equipment to stay mobile. Clever monkey, the War Prince snarled as he tried to reorient himself. But tricks will not save you. Maybe not, Jake thought, but they might give him a chance to do what humans did best, improvise a solution that nobody saw coming. The real fight was just beginning. The gravity fluctuations in Cargo Bay 5 created a three-dimensional battlefield that transformed the nature of their combat. War Prince Kethvar, despite his superior physical abilities, was clearly more comfortable fighting on solid ground according to established patterns. Jake, who had spent years maintaining equipment in zero-G environments, found himself with his first real advantage since the fight began. But advantages only lasted as long as you could exploit them. The War Prince adapted quickly, using his claws to anchor himself to cargo containers and launched devastating attacks from unexpected angles. Jake barely managed to avoid a strike that would have taken his head off, the alien's claws leaving deep gouges in the metal wall behind him. "You fight like prey," War Prince Kethvar observed, his voice carrying a mixture of disappointment and anticipation. "All evasion, no aggression. This is why your species will always be servants to your betters." Jake pushed off from a support beam, spinning to avoid another attack. His mind raced as he tried to find some way to turn his human limitations into advantages. The War Prince was right, Jake couldn't match him for speed, strength, or combat skill. But there had to be something. Then, Jake remembered something Commander Thelvas had said: humans improvise. They think outside the box. They do things that make no sense according to military theory but somehow work anyway. What would make no sense to a predator who had spent his entire life relying on superior physical capabilities? Jake stopped running. In the middle of dodging another lethal swipe, Jake suddenly planted his feet on the cargo bay floor and stood perfectly still. War Prince Kethvar's momentum carried him past his target, confusion flickering across his predatory features. "Have you given up already, little human?" the War Prince asked, though his golden eyes showed uncertainty. "This is less entertaining than I had hoped." "I'm not giving up," Jake said calmly, making no move to defend himself as the alien circled him. "I'm trying something different." "Different how?" Jake looked up at the observation galleries, at the faces of people who had become his family over the years of working together. Then, he looked directly at War Prince Kethvar, meeting those golden eyes without flinching. "I'm refusing to fight you the way you want to be fought." War Prince Kethvar paused, his head tilting slightly in a gesture that somehow made him look more alien than ever. "Explain." "You're a predator. Your entire psychology is built around the hunt, the chase, the struggle, the fear of your prey, the final victory when you prove your superiority. But what happens when your prey refuses to be prey?" Jake began walking slowly toward the War Prince, who instinctively backed away from this unexpected behavior. "What happens when someone looks at your claws and your fangs and your reputation and decides that you're not actually as dangerous as you think you are?" "I could kill you in seconds," the War Prince snarled, but there was something different in his voice now. Uncertainty. "Of course you could. You're bigger, faster, stronger, and better armed than me. But killing me won't prove what you think it will prove." Jake continued his slow, steady approach. "You see, there's something about humans that most other species don't understand." War Prince Kethvar's claws extended fully, but he continued backing away from Jake's advance. "What?" "We're persistence hunters. Not the fastest, not the strongest, but we keep going long after other species would give up. We don't win fights by being superior, we win by refusing to quit until our opponents realize they can't break us." Jake gestured toward the observation galleries again. "Every person in this room has seen humans do the impossible just because it needed doing. Fix unfixable equipment, solve unsolvable problems, find ways to help people even when helping seems pointless. Not because we're better than anyone else, but because we don't know when to quit trying." The War Prince's retreat brought him up against the cargo bay wall. For the first time since the fight began, Jake was advancing and the apex predator was retreating. "You wanted to demonstrate galactic hierarchy," Jake continued. "You wanted to prove that strength makes right, that predators naturally dominate prey, that compassion is weakness. But you picked the wrong species to make your point." War Prince Kethvar's golden eyes were wide now, his predatory confidence replaced by something Jake had never expected to see in a Veltar: confusion, and perhaps even fear. You see, War Prince, humans have been the prey species for every major predator on our home planet. Faster animals, stronger animals, animals with claws and fangs and natural weapons we could never match. But we survived them all. Not by becoming better predators, but by becoming something predators couldn't understand or defeat. Jake stopped just out of the War Prince's reach, close enough that the alien could have killed him with a single swipe, but somehow the roles in their confrontation had completely reversed. We became the species that protects other species. We became the ones who help, who fix, who care about individuals instead of just survival. And that's not weakness, War Prince, that's evolution beyond predation. War Prince Kethvar stared at him for a long moment, then, suddenly, exploded into motion, his claws flashing toward Jake's heart in a strike that should have ended everything. Jake didn't dodge. He didn't block. He simply reached out and caught the War Prince's wrist, stopping the lethal strike inches from his chest. The cargo bay fell completely silent. Jake wasn't stronger than the Veltar. He wasn't faster. But, in that moment, he was utterly immovable, grounded by something the predator couldn't understand or overcome. The War Prince's physical superiority meant nothing against someone who simply refused to be intimidated. This is impossible, War Prince Kethvar whispered, struggling to complete his strike but finding his arm held firm by what should have been a weak prey species. No, Jake said gently, this is human. The War Prince stared at him for several heartbeats, then, something changed in his golden eyes. The predatory hunger faded, replaced by what looked like recognition, or perhaps even respect. You? The War Prince said slowly, you are not what I expected. None of us are, Jake replied, releasing the alien's wrist. That's what makes us human. War Prince Kethvar stepped back, his claws retracting for the first time since he had entered the cargo bay. I came here to prove the supremacy of strength over weakness. And instead you found out that maybe the galaxy is more complicated than predator and prey. The Veltar was quiet for a long moment, studying Jake with new eyes. The combat is concluded, he announced finally, his voice carrying across the cargo bay to reach every observer. Victory goes to Jake Morrison. The observation galleries erupted in cheers, but Jake barely heard them. He was focused on the War Prince, who seemed to be struggling with concepts that had never occurred to him before. What happens now? Jake asked. Now I return to my ship and inform the Confederacy that their understanding of galactic hierarchy may be incomplete. War Prince Kethvar paused at the cargo bay entrance. Human Jake Morrison, you have given me much to consider. As the War Prince departed, Jake felt the weight of the past few hours finally settling on his shoulders. The immediate danger was over, but nothing else had been resolved. He was still the Empress's declared mate, still the center of galactic attention, still facing a future he couldn't predict or control. Commander Thelvas appeared at his side, grinning broadly. Morrison, that was the most unconventional combat victory in recorded galactic history. Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station, not warning alarms this time, but the ceremonial tones reserved for the arrival of Imperial dignitaries. The Imperial Guard, Lieutenant Kexare announced from her position. The Emperor's will is requesting docking permission. Jake felt his stomach tighten. After everything that had happened, the battle, the negotiations, the life-or-death combat, he was about to meet the person who had started all of this. The Empress who claimed he was her destined mate. 20 minutes later, Jake stood in the station's main docking bay, surrounded by Imperial guards whose armor made them look like walking weapons. The airlock hissed open, and Empress Zara Thelvax stepped through. In person, she was even more impressive than her holographic projections had suggested. 8 feet of controlled power, her dark purple skin seemed to absorb the docking bay's lights, and her golden eyes held depths that Jake couldn't begin to fathom. She wore practical traveling clothes rather than her formal regalia, but her presence filled the space around her like a physical force. Their eyes met across the docking bay, and Jake felt something he hadn't expected, a sense of completion, as if a part of himself he hadn't known was missing had suddenly clicked into place. The Empress approached him slowly, her expression cycling through relief, joy, and something that looked like wonder. When she was close enough to touch, she stopped and studied his face with obvious fascination. Jake Morrison, she said softly, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest.
My mate. My partner. My heart.
Your Majesty, Jake replied, not sure of the proper protocol for this situation.
This has been a very strange day.
The Empress smiled, and, for a moment she looked less like the galaxy's most powerful ruler and, more like someone who had found something precious she thought she had lost forever. Strange for both of us, she admitted.
Jake, I know this is overwhelming.
I know your life has been turned upside down by forces beyond your control.
But, I want you to understand something important.
What's that?
You have a choice.
The bond between us is real, I can feel it as clearly as I can feel my own heartbeat.
But, I will not force you to accept it.
If you choose to return to your life here, to remain Jake Morrison the maintenance worker rather than become Prince Consort of the Empire, I will respect that decision. Jake looked around the docking bay at the faces surrounding them. Commander Thelvas, who had risked his career to protect him. Lisa Chen, who had turned mining equipment into weapons. Supervisor Krell Thak, who had shown him that aliens could be family. All the people who had become his community over the years. Then, he looked back at the Empress, at the most powerful person in the galaxy who was offering him the choice to walk away from everything she represented.
What happens if I choose to go with you?
Then, together we try to make the galaxy a more human place. A place where strength is measured not by the ability to dominate, but by the willingness to protect. A place where different species work together instead of competing for dominance. Jake thought about his confrontation with War Prince Kefar, about the moment when he had realized that being human meant something more than just being the weakest species in the galaxy.
And, if I choose to stay here?
Then, I will visit you as often as my duties permit, and we will find a way to build our relationship across the stars.
The bond between us doesn't require you to give up who you are, Jake.
It requires us to discover who we can become together. Jake looked one more time at his friends, his community, the life he had built on the edge of nowhere. Then, he looked at the Empress, at the opportunity to help guide the fate of trillions of beings towards something better than endless competition and conflict. I have one condition, he said finally.
The Empress raised an eyebrow. Name it.
The people here, all the humans working throughout the galaxy in support roles, the ones who keep everything running while being invisible to everyone else, they get representation.
Real representation, not just token positions.
If I'm going to help you rule the galaxy, then we're going to make sure every species has a voice that gets heard. The Empress smiled, and Jake realized that this was exactly what she had hoped he would ask for.
Done, she said immediately.
The first Imperial Council of Species Equality will convene within 6 months. Every species, including humans, will have equal representation regardless of their military or economic power. Jake felt a sense of rightness settling over him, as if the universe had finally found its proper balance. In that case, Your Majesty, I think it's time for this maintenance worker to try a different kind of job. The Empress stepped forward and took his hands in hers, and Jake felt the bond between them flare to life like a star being born. Welcome home, my heart, she whispered. As they prepared to depart for the Imperial capital, Jake looked back one more time at mining station Zirion 7, at the place where he had learned what it really meant to be human in a galaxy that had never understood the strength that came from caring about others. He was Jake Morrison, human, former maintenance worker, and future Prince Consort of the Galactic Imperial Federation. But, more importantly, he was living proof that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply refusing to give up on the people you cared about. The galaxy was about to discover just how dangerous that could be to those who thought strength came from the barrel of a gun rather than the willingness to stand up for what was right. And, Jake Morrison, the most unlikely hero in galactic history, was ready to show them the true meaning of human strength.